Hey everybody, I'm back doing some reviews. I got some bigger projects in the works, so I decided to go ahead and do a smaller scale video while I'm working on those. So this is a game called Resistance is Fruitile. Pun very obvious. It is an indie game that released a few months ago, developed and published by Phase Pixel. I learned about the game because they emailed me, said I should check it out. I said, yeah, sure, I'll check it out. So I went on Steam, bought it, and gave it a number of hours. About 6 now, in fact. And I gotta say my feelings on it are fairly mixed. Resistance is Fruitile plays similarly to like a diet version of Enter the Gungeon. A very, very simplified version of Enter the Gungeon. And I do like roguelikes. I'm a big fan of games like Risk of Rain 2, Enter the Gungeon, etc. So games of this nature appeal to me. I like the sit down, play a while, work towards progression, or sort of take the game on and it's sort of bite-sized or little runs, right? The story of the game is, it's probably just best to read it from the Steam page. As a wedding ceremony inside of an ancient castle comes to a close, a legion of fruit monsters materializes and steals the pure, delicious chocolate wedding cake. But why? That's kind of all you need to know. There is apparently lore that you can read up on in the game. There is a vendor, I'll call them, and I'll get into this person later, but they can offer you expanded Resistance's Fruitile lore if you care about it. But if you're anything like me, there was nothing captivating or interesting about it. It kind of seemed almost as if it was pointless, and it was odd that they even had it in the game. Honestly, I kind of wish they had put effort into other aspects of the game instead of trying to develop some kind of a backstory or lore. Maybe they thought it was more clever or humorous than it really is, because there ain't nothing worse than bad comedy. When the game begins, you can choose your character. You can choose to play either as the groom, or you can choose to play as the bride. Now, while the two of them control very similarly, they do have differences. The groom's weapon is a rapid-fire pistol, and the shotgun belongs to the bride. And while both weapons are viable, I've beaten the game as both, I do have a preference for the bride's shotgun. Similar to games like The Binding of Isaac, your character walks into a room, of which there are a variety of different layouts, and they have to fight all of the enemies inside and clear them away so that the room is unlocked and you can proceed to the next level, or at least the next room. There are 4 different stages, 4 different levels, if you will, and as you complete rooms and get to the end of the level, you fight a boss and then move on to the next level in all of its rooms. And there's a slightly different aesthetic to all of them, though I do feel that it's very recycled, at least in terms of the color palette. Not a big deal, though. Didn't bother me that much. So as you play the game and as you clear out enemies and progress forwards, your character will get stronger and stronger. Killing enemies will award you experience. And when the bar fills up, you level up, and then at the completion of the room in which you have leveled up, you will be able to choose a power-up. And by choose, I mean you're given one at random. Because you choose a card to flip over, and you're randomly given an upgrade. I don't even know why they give you the illusion of choice. There doesn't seem to be any pattern. Flipping over one card in a corner doesn't seem to be the same across multiple playthroughs. I just ended up going from top left to bottom right, and it didn't seem to make any difference. There wasn't any pattern that I noticed. Now, I imagine that the reason they don't allow you to choose specifically which power-ups you want is because some of the power-ups are extremely good and really, really help you out. And some powers I found to be just useless and not really all that great. I know when I was going through my playthroughs, I thought to myself, if I could have the ability to choose my powers, I kind of know which ones I would choose. So I assume it's some level of randomness that they wanted to give to characters, so not every playthrough would have your character ending up the exact same way. They would just be very powerful in different ways. However, Resistance's Fruitile is a game that very much relies on you powering yourself up. It's much like Risk of Rain 2, right? Or Enter the Gungeon, like a lot of other roguelikes. If you don't get upgrades for your character, then you are just not going to be able to put out enough damage to complete the game. And if you get a bunch of power-ups that aren't that great, then yeah, you will feel like you're kind of getting screwed over. Also, an issue that I do have with this game is that you are only given a reward in terms of an upgrade upon completion of the room, regardless of whether or not you leveled up at the very beginning of that room set of enemies or near the end. So you could walk into a room almost ready to level up, kill a couple enemies, and level up, but you won't have access to that upgrade until the end of the room. And because upgrades are very potent, it's very possible that that potentially could have saved your life if you got that upgrade when you actually did level up. It's doubly odd to me because the game does have a function where you can pause the game to look at the upgrades that you have, and this is the exact same screen that is the power selection menu. So I'm curious why they don't allow you to pause the game to level up your character with an upgrade when you've actually leveled up. Also, as you play through the game, you'll find crystals that increase your score if you care about score at all. Most importantly, though, they essentially act as a persistent currency that you can use on your current run or in runs to come. They do things like allow you to warp to later stages if you don't want to go through the whole thing. Highly suggest that you do go through the whole thing because you need the XP and the power-ups for it, and the game's not particularly long anyway. But you can spend crystals at progressively more expensive rates as you go to upgrade your character without needing to level up. So you can spend 100 crystals and get an upgrade, and then 150, etc., etc. By hitting spacebar, your character can dodge, in which case they'll just turn slightly opaque, and you'll be invulnerable for a moment. Very useful, adds a little bit of a skillful mechanic to the game, just like Enter the Gungeon has. Your character also has a power bar, and this power bar fills as you do damage to enemies. When the bar is full, you can choose to expend it and heal yourself, which is a nifty thing. I like that as a mechanic. Or you can also use an offensive super attack. As for the enemies themselves that you spend your time fighting, I think it's kind of a mixed bag. They're fine, and I think just okay is a perfect way to describe them. There's not too much variety, but there's enough. Because the theme of the game is fighting sentient fruit who want to attack you, you have little blueberries and strawberries and bananas that chase after you, and they come in different tiers of toughness. You have green grapes and purple grapes and raspberries. Thematically, it's kind of hit and miss, honestly. I feel like they kind of should have been a bit more inventive with a lot of this stuff. Because as I played this game, I couldn't help but feel like there was a bit of a, I don't know, tonal inconsistency, I guess you could say. Let me explain what I mean. So, one of the enemies are a green bunch of grapes, and they start to flash, and if you don't kill them, then they'll basically explode and send grapes out in like a starburst pattern. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's just a bunch of grapes. It's just a lot of little grapes connected. Yeah, that makes sense. But other grapes, like purple grapes, they'll just shoot at you with guns. And raspberries might have shotguns. They'll shoot you with firearms, which is just kind of weird. And I feel like it's a missed opportunity. If you're going to have enemies that hit you at range, why not have grapes that like take off a grape from themselves and throw it at you? Or pomegranates that peel the top off and seeds shoot out. Maybe bananas fly at you in like a curvy boomerang kind of pattern. Things like that. And then at the same time, while I think there's a lot of missed opportunities for more thematically appropriate things that the enemies could do, there's also a few good ones. For instance, the enemy spawners are bowls of fruit. They're fruit bowls. That makes sense. You fight fruit. Fruit bowls spawn fruit. But even this is odd. Like a blue fruit bowl will spawn oranges, but an orange fruit bowl will spawn blueberries. That's weird. Is that a legitimate mistake? I feel like it's just kind of a little bit creatively lazy to just say, oh yeah, these fruit, they just have guns. They just have guns and shoot you with their guns, like actual firearm guns, instead of coming up with something that was more fruity or berry related, you know? I also find it odd that the whole idea is that you're a bride and a groom at a wedding in a castle and you have to fight fruit, but you have the ability to plant a mine, essentially, that will act as a turret to shoot at enemies, and it will also explode if enemies walk on top of it. It's like, it's not a bad idea, but it just seems odd. It's just a mine turret. Like, okay, I think you might have lost a chance here to be creative with it. Those are just kind of nitpicky, though. I wish they would have just been thought a little bit more out of the box and really, really played up this fruit theme as far as they could. One thing, though, I can't say I am particularly fond of the boss fights in this game. They're fine. They're serviceable. Honestly, I think the game might be better without them. Or maybe they shouldn't be so bullet spongy. The game's got a good pace going with how you're dodging grape bullets, or you're dodging projectiles that are being thrown and shot at you, and you're avoiding enemies that are trying to attack you, and you're going through rooms and leveling up and using your powers, and that's got a really good pace to it. But then you get to these boss fights, and it seems to slow down, and these bosses take so many hits to kill, they just seem to drag on for a while. They aren't so difficult, where I think this is a huge problem, but I think maybe would have toned down the boss fight length a bit. More rooms like this. The aesthetic of the game, though, is overall fairly simple, very serviceable, kind of charming in its simplicity. You can tell that this isn't a AAA game. It's an indie game made and developed and published by one studio. It shows, but it's not a bad game. Again, as I said before, think of it as Enter the Gungeon, just like a very diet, cheaper version of it. I think, though, the game would have done a lot better in my mind if they would have added a little bit of polish to certain places. There's only two characters that you can choose from, the bride and the groom, for instance. The bride shoots a shotgun, but her character model has a tiny little pistol, which looks a little odd. I don't know why they didn't give her a shotgun if she shoots a shotgun, especially considering there are enemies in the game that use shotguns, so I know you have the art assets for it. Just seems a little odd to me. It doesn't impact the game mechanically, but I think that they kind of lost an opportunity to add that little bit of polish to the game. Similarly, even though you can move and shoot in any direction, your character sprite only has north, east, south, and west as their appearances. And I think that it would have, especially because the player character is kind of the central focus of the game, might have been a good idea to give him diagonal movement sprites. There's also no animation for dodging in this game. Your character just turns slightly translucent and slides to a direction. There's no spin, no anything. And I think that it would have been nice to have added that and seen that. It would have made the game feel a lot more high quality than it would have been, even if it was just a spin because you have the four sprites of the four directions. Just do a quick couple spins as you dodge, maybe. That would be better than what they have. Resistance is Fruitile. Not a very long game. I've beaten it with both characters, and there's not really any reason to keep playing other than just personal satisfaction. It's a very casual game, one that you can just play in the background while you're doing whatever. Who knows? There's not much in the way of persistence. You keep your crystals between runs, but ultimately the only thing to really spend those on is just upgrades, and you'd get those anyway, and they're not really necessary, these extra upgrades, so not really much in the way of a reason to invest your time too far into the game after you beat it. Also, no rebindable keys. That's kind of disappointing. I don't really like the dodge key being spacebar. I would much rather rebind it to another button, but I don't have the option. I can't rebind the keys. That's a mistake. That's not good. But for all of its faults, a lot of them just owing to its simplicity. It is an indie game. It works fine. It's mechanically pretty solid. I would say, though, that one of the problems I noticed is that in the first boss fight, you fight against a Peach, and in his intro animation, he fires indiscriminately sometimes around the room while you're stuck in a cutscene. And you can get hit and take damage during that cutscene, which could potentially kill you, or just you take damage, and there's nothing you could do for it. So I hope they patch that out, because that's really dumb. Not like a huge deal, but that's something you should fix that. But other than that, mechanically solid. It works. It all fits together. It's got a unique little aesthetic going on to it. The sprites are fine. The enemies look nifty. It's a charming little game. It's $7 on Steam at the moment of this review, at least. A bit pricey, I think, for the time that most people will get out of the game. So, recommendation is moderate. If you like this kind of thing, might be worth a look. Nice casual game to play in the background. It does support multiple players, 2 players on the same screen. So if you need a game, of that nature, this might be what you're looking for. But I certainly think that with a game like this, FaZe Pixel is very much in a position to make some great games in the years to come. Because Lord knows these days, we'll take all the indie games we can get. And I'm certainly glad that games like Resistance's Fruitile is out there.